Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone around the world. You're welcome to yet another event in the African Literature Association's lecture series for the 2021-2022 academic year. My name is Akin Adeshokon. I teach comparative literature and African cinema and media studies at Indiana University, Bloomington. It's been my pleasure and privilege to moderate this series over the past year and a half in collaboration with my colleagues in the Executive Council of the Association, including Matt Brown of the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and James Makoko of William and Hobart College in Geneva, New York. The series began in September 2020 and has continued to receive the support of the current Executive Council of the Association, particularly of the current president, Mohamed Kamara of Washington and Lee University, who is a co-organizer of the series. As always, we would like to acknowledge the continued support of the other members of the council, as well as the larger membership of the association. Due to your continuing attention and attendance these events, the series has come to be regarded as, in the past year, as a publicly engaged feature of the association's presence, especially in this age when public engagement is roughly equivalent to being socially or civically responsive, and to be digitally audible and visible when and where connections are stable. So as always, thank you, everyone. Today's event brings into a conversation two people, a filmmaker and a film scholar, who have produced work that focus on the topic of religious fundamentalism. Mamadou Dia is a Senegalese director and writer whose 2019 feature film, Baamum Nafi, which means Nafi's father in Fulani, is under spotlight today and will be discussed in a dialogue with Carmen McCain, a specialist in Nigerian cinema and Kannywood, who is also a co-author of the book Boko Haram with Brandon Kendhammer. It's a great pleasure and a wonderful opportunity to have both of them with us because in an important sense, their works bring a great deal of nuance and sensitivity to the controversial and easily stereotyped issue that is religious fundamentalism. In recent years, since perhaps the release of Timbuktu by the Malian-Mauritanian director Abdurrahman Sissako in 2014, cinematic and literary representation of particularly Islamic fundamentalism, and if you are looking at my text, you see the scare quotes around the word Islamic, have proliferated in a manner typical of accounts of political or humanitarian emergencies around the world. What makes the African-invested variants of these representations, such as Baamum Nafi, Desmond Obiagele's The Milkmaid 2020, Abdurrauf Mustafa and Kate Mega's Overcoming Boko Haram 2020 also, and Carmen's book, is the sensitivity and the scholarly rigor with which the authors have approached the topic. These two features amount to a negative discourse on religious fundamentalism, a phenomenon that must be represented. And so Boko as communication, expression, or representation cannot be haram. So Boko ba haram, as we say. I shall leave it to our speakers to get us further along this path. And I'll start by introducing Mamadou Dia. He obtained his master's degree in directing and writing from New York University Tisch School of the Arts. Prior to going to film school, Dia worked as a journalist based in Dakar, Senegal, for agencies like the Associated Press, Agence France Presse, and Agence France Presse. Excuse me. Mamadou tries in his films to explore the fine line between reality and fiction by drawing on his personal and professional experiences. His previous film, titled Senegalese Cinema, premiered at the Venice and Toronto festivals in 2016. Baamum Nafi premiered at the Locarno International Film Festival in 2019, winning the Best Feature Award and the Golden Leopard in the section Filmmakers of the Present. It has been shown in over 80 festivals worldwide and was Senegal's official selection for the 2021 Academy Awards, alias Oscars. It had a theatrical release in Senegal and France. Through his production company, Joye Didi, which he co-founded with Mababa, the film toured Senegal and was shown in open-air places with an inflatable screen. Over to you, Mamadou.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much, Akin, for this introduction. Thank you, Carmen, for your time and joining us today. And it's a real pleasure to get to speak here today. Thank you, President Camara. Thank you, the Association of African Literature Association. So I'm here to talk today about Baamum Nafi, Nafi's father, which is my first feature film that it was shot set in Senegal, in my native town that is called Matam in northern Senegal. So one thing to keep in mind is that beside the two main actors, everyone else, almost everyone else, is from my hometown. So these are people that I've known, I've seen growing up, and I wanted to make this film share with them. My first idea was to touring Africa as a journalist. We always think that extremism is always the other. It is something that we cannot be able to do. We are not capable of being extremist in some ways. We still think the other person is the one who is wrong. We still think that we can see the signs. And then in my trips, in my investigations, and knowing people who live in these very Pacific countries who ended up being in trouble, most of them were very peaceful in that way, and they didn't see the signs. It was very, I'd say, sneaky in some ways. So for me, that was the first point I wanted to share. And for that, because we're talking about film, I want to share a clip before I keep moving. Let me do this right away. There you go. Okay.
Bandiraɓe debbo e gorko binde indeji mon e carnet oɗo yo ɓendu duuɓi mon wonande anduɓe adresse leerɗo to jomum addirante awdi mum
hitande fof ko ni min mbaɗata ta hay puttere min jeyata min ndemani rawande oɗon mbar min gulal tan mbar min gulal tan bolle puyɗi
lettre ministre agriculture nani hikka so Allah jaɓi on keɓat awdi ndi nde he ƴeewe ɓennini
so wonko mbawɗa addan min toɓo ha ilna guese amen min mbawa lorde makkaji amen e maroji amen
cohloton min tan ko nde woteji mon ngari haɗon podana min tan ko min jiyata min nanta
bandiraɓe
mawni wecceji yulni laafaji garane perte yimɓe
bandiraɓe almami hokku hen duwaw ceerno simila
an jomiraɗo amin ñagoma cuura amen danda amen waɓe janginde amen awo أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
bandiraɓe to jakoroɗo e laamu jakoroɗo e koye mon alhaji ousmane janggo meɗen koye juuɗe meɗen woni
oko lamɗo
minima ɗum kala ko haɗa waɗa
nanara ke
awdi yari koɗo musere men haala ba ɗum ko saha ha ɗum koɗini fiiɗu
awdi yari makka
e bandiraɓe bandiraɓe
bolle puyɗi
batu men hande o ko batuji ɗi mbaɗanoɗen hitande fof
monsieur le maire
kedde o
maire jaltuɗo golle ma jaafoɗa bandiraɓe so tawi awdi ndiɗo ne manki mi yiwon bisimilla mon galle
ko lamɗo o galo o jogoro wuro ngo yonti kay ko alaji Ousmane on alaji Ousmane
nana ɗum de ala ko bonnata koye neydi jeeya
ko jaabi ko laaɓi
So, yes, so this was a scene from the movie that for me is important because this is the moment of the film we realize that the person we think is from outside is actually from the hometown. So this is two brothers, those two people, the imam who's doing the prayers and the other person who is throwing that veil to this young lady, they are brothers, siblings. So it was important to show that part of us, that those organizations sometimes are taking a part that is left by our governments, by our leaders in some ways. These kids and these people here want seeds to plant for the living. So whoever is bringing that is the person they're going to talk to. So that was very important to show in this film. And to come back a little bit in the idea, this idea actually was born in the US, even though it talks about Islam. It was in 2016. I was living in New York doing my MFA at NYU, and Donald Trump was elected. And mind you, at that time has been 2 years living in the US, and New York being the bubble, I've never imagined that this guy could be elected in the United States and democratically elected. So Alhaji Usman has some kind of Donald Trumpian air in his way of doing things. So it was important for me to show that these people, sometimes we let them come in and we see the signs and we decide to ignore them most of the time. So Alhaji Usman is that person. And the rhythm is that way, in the sneaky way of coming out. Because when I travel to Burkina Faso, Mali, or Nigeria, it didn't just happen overnight. It was things that happened one on one, slowly, that we didn't think it was enough to take action. Cherno, in this movie, actually doesn't take much of actions, because he's saying, as long as I'm safe, as long as my daughter is safe, as long as my small mosque is safe, so I'm safe. So Donald Trump was the first reason. The second reason is my father was an imam in Senegal. My grandfather was. And but my sisters never veiled their heads, or it wasn't an issue to listen to music at home or watch movies. We would go to we would go watch TV our neighbor's yard. So it is important. When I came to the US, when I talked about that, I always had questions. People would ask me, oh, what does it mean, an imam? How was your family? Is it an issue that you study filmmaking now? So I started explaining a lot. And for me, it was, why do I have to explain myself because of my religion? Why do I have to explain myself because of my upbringing? That is something that is mostly part of the unknown. People don't ask those questions because there is a mean side of it, just because they don't know. So for me, I said, okay, this is a movie that I could make to show people that the majority of Muslims, you don't even recognize them on the streets. Maybe you meet them every single day. Maybe they are your neighbors and your friends, because what is important for the big majority of us is not bombing or terrorism. This is a tiny fraction. And that fraction actually kills more Muslims than other community, which is reality today. And it was important for me that in this film, we use also oral tradition. We don't see many written things because it's all said. We still live in a community where people have a word. So when Cherno gives his word, he takes actions. This is the way he sees the city. When Usman comes, he thinks he's saving this town. These people here taking the seeds, they think Usman is helping them. They're not thinking religion mostly. They're not thinking extremism necessarily. They're thinking someone is coming to save us. And I think there is a big parallel with the US today, or with many other countries in the world, when someone is saying, hey, I'm here to protect you because somebody is coming from the outside. Because we still think there is this conception of the whatever is menacing comes from outside of the world. So this visual tool for me, it was important, as Akin was reading the bio, that when this film was made, the first people to see it in Senegal were actually the people who made it. So these people in Matam, my business partner, Maba, and I, we bought an inflatable screen, put it in a van, and drove to my small town. And we showed them the movie, like 4 nights. And every night, it was very important to have this Q&A and these discussions. And sometimes we go over for 2 hours because people would talk about it. Luckily, Senegal, knocking on wood, we haven't had any terrorist or extremist attack, but the debate can still start. There is nothing wrong of talking about it. So it was important for us to have those people talk about it. We went in from Matam, we went to Saint Louis, we went to Thiès and Dakar at the university. And it was always the same thing. Let's talk about this. Did we see any signs? So for me, the main question is, my community is not an exception. That could happen in my community. But what would we do? How could we stand? How could we talk about it? How could you have an open debate about what's happening? Because as I said before, the sneaky way and the reasons why people get into it is a very different way. It's not always pariahs. It's also people who are smart, who are graduated from the best schools in the world, who have something sharing. Because some of them, there is a character named Abda, which is a small child that is a threat in the movie. We see him all along the movie. He seems that he doesn't have a family. He's just going around, and these people came and adopted him and gave him a purpose. So those are the things I wanted to share with you. And I think my time is almost up. And this clip and telling that this is something that is dear to me as a Muslim African man, it is important for me to say that the majority of our people, for instance, in Senegal, laicity, I don't know if laicity is the English word, is a very important for us. We have siblings who could be Christian and Muslim at the same time, mixed families. We even have a mixed cemetery in Senegal. So that was my idea of bringing this and to have questions to ask the people. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, well, thank you. That's very, very interesting. And I'm sure that there will be very quite exciting questions about this. I already have several of my own, but I will bring in our next speaker, Carmen McCain, who is going to speak to the film as well as to our work. Carmen McCain is an assistant professor of English at Westmont College, and will be, starting this fall, I believe, lecturer of West African languages and culture at SOAS at the University of London, beginning September 2022, so that's right. Her research focuses on Nigerian literature, film, and Hausa cultural production. Most recently, she co-authored the book Boko Haram with Brandon Kendhammer. But in addition to her academic publications, she's a former columnist with the Nigerian newspaper Daily Trust. So Carmen, you are on.
Thank you. I'm gonna hit my timer. Thank you so much, Mamadou, for making this film. I'm going to speak about half of my time about Baamum Nafi, and then I'll touch on my own research on the Hausa language, Kannywood film industry in Nigeria, and artistic responses to Boko Haram, which we talk about in this book. I've not been to Senegal, but the first time I watched Baamum Nafi, I invited a few colleagues over to my house, and I kept bursting out in the middle of the film. This is what happened in Nigeria. This is how it happened. So this film, like Abdurrahman Sissako's Timbuktu, is an elegy to what has been lost to the incursion of violent extremism in West Africa. And it distills down this process to a single town and family. The Imam Tierno is a beautifully nuanced character. And let me go ahead and share my slides. And here's an image I thought was quite powerful. So he's a beautifully nuanced character. He's a spiritual leader of the town, as his grandfather and father were before him. And he's an ordinary man. In Hausa, we would call someone like him a mutumin kirki. He finds himself a fragile protective wall against the destruction of his community, despite his own reluctance. One of the men who near the beginning of the film rejects Tierno's ethical stance on accepting money from terrorists filtered through his brother Usman, who we've seen in the clip there, later repents and tells Tierno he's the only one who can save the town. This is a pretty heavy load to place on the fragile shoulders of Tierno, who we've seen from the very beginning of the film is quite ill. But I think this image of him guarding this little boy from his radicalized brother symbolizes how he can't stop protecting the community even after he tries to resign from being an imam. These brothers, and I might be making an assumption. I'm calling these two men, the little boy and the man facing him, brothers, become a reflection of the brothers at the center of the narrative. There's a little boy who loves chasing a tire around town. We see him throughout the film, and then his older brother becomes a kind of henchman for Usman, and they reflect the central relationships. So Tierno takes pleasure in ordinary human things. He writes love poetry, he sits by the river, he chats about popular music with his daughter, he kicks a football around with his nephew Tokara, whose own father rejects such things. Usman Tierno's brother and Tokara's father comes back from abroad with shady money, political ambitions, and a desire to transform a town he had left as a young man. And as Mamadou describes, he believes he's saving his town. Rather than playing football with his son, he stabs and deflates balls that the children kick into his face, seemingly like Boko Haram leader Abu Bakr Shekau proclaiming the game un-Islamic. Tierno's freedom has been curtailed from childhood by his brother's opportunities, and he fears that the proposed marriage between his own daughter Nafi and Usman's son Tokara will place Usman even firmly more in charge, not only of the family, but of the town, as Usman becomes a front for the even more radical Sheikh. Usman reminds me of Nigerian politicians who cynically campaigned on Sharia law to attract idealistic voters, but who ended up unleashing forces they couldn't control. He wins over the town in part, and I'm glad that Mamadou showed that scene, in part through a form of bribery. He shows up at the mosque with a bag full of money, and we later see the Sheikh's son Munzir bring boxes of money to his house, showing how Usman himself has been compromised. And in fact, we see Usman, like the politicians who use Sharia as a tool to get into power, he's more concerned with political power than he is with piety, despite all of his pretensions. So he kind of pompously insists on being called Al-Haji, but no pious man would threaten his sister-in-law, as he does in the film, or allow her to be spat upon by a lackey. And his house full of weapons makes it clear that his intentions are violent, but the townspeople don't initially see what Tierno sees. Although Tierno rejects Usman's money, his insistence that the people of the town choose either him or Usman ends up costing him the goodwill of the other men in the mosque who take the money and then side with Usman in this power struggle. Yet, I really like this scene that he showed. We also see the structural reasons why the community members might gravitate to what Usman offers. The first time we see Nafi, Tierno's daughter, she's laughing at a video clip of the MPs fighting in parliament, and there are very similar things happening in Nigeria. The secular government is ineffectual, buffoonish, and corrupt. The rhetoric used by the extremists taps into the language of decolonization. Munzir, the son of the Sheikh, speaks to reforming a corrupted system, saying he came to, and this is a quote from the film, he came to develop our countries. Our resources have been dilapidated. We need to change the system. True Islam is the answer. And so you can see how people who lost faith in their government might be seduced by such an answer. It kind of takes on the language of decolonization. And the meeting where Usman, surrounded by women in black hijabs that we saw earlier, faces the mayor who sits with a woman with uncovered hair, and Tierno, who has made the decision to strategically ally himself with the politician, even if he doesn't necessarily agree with him. The mayor promises the seeds to the community, but a man points out that they only make promises in election years, where Usman gives them what they need immediately and tells them to seek him out if they need any more seeds. And so the government has failed them, so they seek the help elsewhere. And I'm reminded of how Boko Haram offered financial assistance to young people in exchange for attending evening classes by which they became radicalized. One of the ways Muhammad Yusuf, the original leader of Boko Haram, gained followers was by offering business opportunities and microfinance loans to unemployed young people. And yet the costs are great. Although many women in town agree to the mass marriage that Usman plans because they want men who can afford to take care of them, such arrangements come with conditions. Usman starts out with smiles and compliments, presenting Nafi with a hijab as part of the courtship gifts for his son Tokara. But by the time of the meeting with the mayor, and you can see the young woman sitting beside the mayor, the hijab is not offered but lobbed. We saw that in the clip at the uncovered woman. And that's only the beginning. There's a couple that the Sheikh son sees when he first arrives, holding hands. And later, once the town has changed, we see the same couple being kind of chased, and the woman is forcibly put into a hijab. The cheerful mixed gender crowds at a wedding, and you can see the top screenshots there, become segregated as women watch a naming ceremony from a barred veranda while the men are sitting there. So these are physical changes that happen in the town. Tierno's shop and the local church are ransacked. And at the beginning of the film, the streets are full of children playing. Near the end, the streets are deserted. Girls now clad in hijabs still jump ropes, but run away when they see the vigilantes. And most movingly, this child with the tire that we see throughout the film, he's forced to watch the punishment of the thief's hand being cut off, and his brother Basa or Abdullah burns the tire. So there are hints that Usman is beginning to realize himself he's over his head as the Sheikh's representatives push to kind of tear down the mosque that his grandfather built and build a new one. And when they plan to appoint as an imam a bumbling fool who can't even properly recite the Quran, but who will do what they say. So it's not about devotion, but power. And even Usman becomes troubled by that at the end. There is some relief at the end of the film, but there's a foreboding final scene where and here's the little boy whose tire is being burnt by his brother. And then at the end, he's now dressed like the sheikh. And so there's some kind of foreboding end there. It's heartbreaking because it's so true to what has happened, if not in Senegal yet, in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon. And yet there's also moments of sly humor in the film that are really enjoyable. When the men in the mosque throw around the word hypocrisy, Tierno skewers each one of them, pointedly referring to their own sins. Basa, who takes on the name Abdallah at the beginning of the film and becomes Usman's enforcer, is an idiot who repeatedly points a gun at his own face while gnawing on chicken. So there are these funny moments in the film that also remind me of funny moments in Sissako's Timbuktu. So that show the farcical moments of jihadist Puritanism. The hope in the film comes from Tierno, his courageous wife, and his determined daughter. Nafi refuses to yield to her uncle's new rules and does not allow anything, not even her love for her fiancé Tokara, get in the way of her education. Tierno is the spiritual guardian and shepherd of the town. While almost all the characters here are Muslims, I love this brief scene that's pictured here, where Tierno stands with the Christian pastor consoling him after the church has been ransacked, right after his own shop has also been ransacked. And so despite leading congregations in different forms of worship, the imam and the pastor have more in common with each other than they have with Usman. And an imagery that speaks as much to Christians as it might to Muslims, we see Tierno as a good shepherd when he frees a sheep caught in a net. And it's in this moment he's resigned from being an imam, but he really begins to return to his vocation as a shepherd of Yanti, guarding his sheep against those who would bind them. So this is something that especially spoke to me in my own research. I've written kind of about the response of Muslim artists and Christian artists in northern Nigeria to Boko Haram. And so Baamum Nafi feels like a compressed capsule of what happened over many years in Nigeria, from the politicization of Sharia law to the disillusion of political solutions that led to the eventual emergence of Boko Haram. So the book Boko Haram that I wrote with Brandon Kendhammer is a social history meant for the general reader of the origins of the sect in the 1990s to around 2017. My contribution to the book in particular was looking at popular culture responses to Boko Haram. And I'll touch on some of what we talk about in the book here alongside a little bit of background on my own research on Kannywood. So Kannywood is the northern Nigerian Hausa language film industry. It's stylistically quite different from the English language Nollywood films you may have seen. Most films are interspersed with singing and dancing sequences inspired by Indian films. And because of their more conservative northern audiences, they face a variety of formal rules and regulations designed to police the morality. And I focused much of my research on writing about a censorship crisis that happened while I was doing my PhD research. The Kano State Censorship Board was created in 2001 after Sharia law was implemented in Kano. And there had been informal censorship before that by marketers. But after 2001, if filmmakers wanted to access the powerful Kano market, which is where they sold VCDs at that time, they had to pass their films through the State Censorship Board and the National Censorship Board. When I visited Kano in 2006, I fell in love with the creative movement I saw happening in literature and film and music. I was enchanted by young people dancing on singing and dancing on the side of the roads with a camera for films. And it was the same sort of exuberant joy that I see in Baamum Nafi and the character of Nafi and Tokara and the other young people who gather around listening to music and dancing. However, in 2017, sorry, I'm behind on these. There was a sex scandal involving a leaked video of a Hausa actress. And by the time I returned in 2008, everything had changed. Much of the filmmaking in Kano had been shut down, and films were largely shot out of state. So I watched for several years how filmmakers, writers, singers responded, making songs and then films that satirically attacked the censors board and the government that empowered it. So between 2007 and 2011, over 1,000 people associated with the industry were arrested. And elsewhere, I've written about the films and music made by artists responding to their own imprisonment during the censorship crisis, and these are 3 examples. Finally, with the election in 2011, filmmakers supported the former governor and the censorship crisis came to an end. That was about the time I left Kano and went to Jos to write up my dissertation. So my departure from Kano came around the same time that Boko Haram was on the rise. So following the extrajudicial execution of the founder, Muhammad Yusuf, in 2009, and a brief lull in the year for about a year, by 2010, Boko Haram had burst back under the leadership of Abubakar Shekau, vowing revenge. There were violent attacks on prisons, military and government targets, and eventually on banks, media houses, churches, mosques, schools, and other civilian targets. And eventually Boko Haram became a household name around the world with the kidnap of 276 schoolgirls from their school in Chibok, instigating the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. So as I was writing my dissertation on how Kannywood changed with the censorship crisis, Northern Nigeria became a place where everything changed for everybody. No one knew when it was safe to travel anymore or where the next bomber or shooter might strike. Soldiers would block off streets and erect large cement barriers that didn't let anyone park too close to a bank or a school or barracks. There was an attack on York University where I lived in Kano only a few months before after I moved to Jos, and also an attack on the Koken headquarters church in Jos, only about a block and a half from where I lived. So one day as I was writing, I heard a car with a loudspeaker driving around the block, blaring Hausa music and the lyrics were being sung in defiance of Boko Haram. So that song became the root of my next research project. I became interested in investigating how, against the sort of reductionist ways that the global media was presenting the crisis, subaltern voices from the region were responding. And I wanted to find out who made this defiant music, and how are people the most affected by Boko Haram responding artistically in this time of uncertainty. So I looked first at Kannywood, since it's the major entertainment industry in the north. But the filmmakers I spoke to were really worried about being attacked by Boko Haram, since Boko Haram has the tendency to attack its critics. And so they weren't at that time making films about Boko Haram, but I did notice some films that were sort of metaphorically responding. So this one shows a freakish flood where people are running away and losing each other, reflecting the refugee crisis. Another one, Hindu, is kind of a folkloric tale where a woman is forcibly married by a man who has abducted lots of other wives and tells violent stories to children, reflecting the Boko Haram abductions and the rise of child soldiers. And then in the end, there's a kind of magical solution that reflects some of the popular stories about Boko Haram being prayer vigils being held against them and so on. Later, and this didn't make it into the film, there were some Kannywood filmmakers did start making films. Zahraddin Sani went through a lot of censorship to get this out in 2017. The filmmaker Yasin Awal released a poster, but then didn't end up making the film because he was getting pushback from leaders. And then there have been other films made more for, sorry, my computer is frozen up. There have been other films made for more international markets and audiences, including The Milkmaid and Voiceless. So Voiceless, I believe, is the first Hausa language film on Netflix. Milkmaid was nominated, was Nigeria's submission for the 2021 Academy Awards. And so let me get though to the thing that I'm the most interested in, which were these music videos that I was hearing being played around this time. And so I'm just going to play a clip of the video. If anyone's interested, we can talk more about it in the Q&A, but I think it reflects the way that Christians and Muslims are kind of seeking community together in fighting against Boko Haram. I'm just going to play a little short clip. This is Savior White Inwa, who also goes by the name of Amir Jikin Shakma.
Ya Ubangijin Allah, ga muna a gabanka daidai wannan lokaci, muna miƙa kawunarmu a gabanka game da ababen da suke faruwa a ƙasarmu Najeriya da dukkan duniya baki daya. Ga wannan kungiya mai suna Boko Haram ta zame wa al'ummanka gagar badau. Ba addu'a muke yi ya Ubangiji ka hallaka su ba, amma muna roƙonka ne ya Ubangiji ka taɓa su da wutan ruwanka mai tsarki domin su tuba. Gama ka ce lalle ne waɗannan ababe za su faru. Idan kuwa mun ga suna faruwa, lokacin zuwan almasihu ya gabato. Ba ma bukata da ya Ubangiji ka bar su a cikin zunubansu, ka gafarta musu saboda ba su san abun da suke yi ba. Musulmai da Kirista na Najeriya baki ɗaya, ya Ubangiji ka tabbatar mana da zaman lafiya a tsakaninmu. Shekau. Amin. Shekau, shekau. Ya Yesu. Shekau, shekau. Yanci bakku daina kuka, komai mu bar wa Allah. Anabcin Ubangiji ita ce a yau ke cika. Yanci bakku daina kuka, komai mu bar wa Allah. Anabcin Ubangiji ita ce adult children sibo alamin.
I'll stop it there because I'm over time, but thank you for letting me speak.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Carmen, and thank you, Mamadou. And you can both come on now. This is quite interesting. There are a lot of very stimulating ideas that both of you have shared, and I'm really quite excited that we have this extremely, different, but also kind of ultimately compatible reflections on this phenomenon. So my sense is that since Carmen sort of responds to the film, that perhaps you want to share a few questions with Mamadou first, and then we hear from the audience who will be posting to the chat. I think the comments section on YouTube, but then there will be they actually already are happening. So I think we just saw one posted. But I will still, before we come to those questions from the audience, to have you guys be in dialogue. And so if you have a couple of questions, maybe one or two, Carmen, that you want to go with so that Mamadou can respond, and he may actually also have responses to yours, and then we'll go ahead from there. So thank you.
Sure. One of the things I was really interested in was your work as a journalist, and I was just interested in hearing about how that work kind of impacted how you decided to tell these stories on film.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you all. And thank you so much for this presentation. I am always amazed with great scholars, like the things they see at every single piece of film or production. Yeah. And it brings me back to this thing that the Malian filmmaker Daouda Coulibaly told me once, that our inspirations are sometimes so digested that we don't see it. We need someone like a good scholar to point it out. Sometimes say, oh, this was what I was thinking about. And sometimes they're not even conscious. Thank you for pointing them out, like the two brothers, Abda and Basa becoming Abdullah, the two other brothers, And this place you mentioned is actually the local place in my hometown. This is something that talks also about people living in different religions. So my hometown is tiny, far away from the capital city, but the church there is 100 years old. So it just shows how communities have lived together since that time. So yeah, so I think journalism helped a lot, because I think one of my inspiration, you've talked about Abdurrahman Sissoko, who is one of my favorite filmmakers, did this movie about Timbuktu. Timbuktu is a city I visited, luckily, before the invasion and after the invasion. So I've seen that city going from the most peaceful, most loving, welcoming city to that place that we knew at that time in the past. So when I went there, because I have friends, I've talked to them. I'm like, what happened? Did you see anything happening? So there was nothing major. It was always tiny, small things that changed the city. It was like, oh, someone has built a house, I don't know, in a month. This other person traveled and came back, started gathering. There were these meetings behind some walls. People wouldn't talk to us. So it was just those interesting kind of things. And in Nigeria also the same thing. People are so peaceful, like in all of those countries. Burkina Faso, people so sometimes like nickname them the most welcoming people in Africa. How could that happen, right? And it was always the same thing. So the journalism was very important for me, because that made me understand that the threat is not something you can see. The threat is within us. Political extremism in the US, people who voted for Trump, there were probably so many people who lied about it and voted for Trump and didn't tell us. Maybe some of our close friends did vote for Trump, because this guy couldn't win if he didn't have many supporters. So that's how extremism is. It's not just something you can put on the face of someone. So journalism helped me like that, and knowing that there are so many Africans. So the one I'm putting here, I made sure this is my local hometown. This is my native language. This is people I know, because it would have been a different way in different places. This could be brought in this way. They could corrupt an institution that is wedding, that is marriage, in that kind of thing. So it was important to bring that. Thank you for the question.
Is that all, or do you have another one? I want to come in. We want to give you some privilege to ask a few more questions. But if you want to pass it up, we're already having questions from the audience, and I'm happy to go there.
I'll give a chance to the audience.
Okay, that's good. So we have several questions. The first is from Pelumi Folajimi, and it's for Mamadou. I'm sure you can see, but I'll read it for the purpose of those who can. Since your film provides commentary on Donald Trump, does it foresee or has relevance to the ongoing brutality of Vladimir Putin in Ukraine or the violence of September 11? So that one, yes. And he also has a question for Carmen. But let's go to you first, and then Carmen, if you can say that, and I'll read it when it's your turn. I just don't want this to pile up. So Mamadou, do you want to have a response to that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because in some ways, Putin and Trump are using the same techniques. And this technique is just called nationalism in some ways, like make people feel that they have lost their pride, make people feel that they have lost their place in where they live. And you are the one who is bringing back. That's what Putin is doing today. He's saying, Russians, we were great in the past. We lost it all because we lost the Soviet Union. We got to go back to that Soviet Union. And think also, going back to this experience with journalism, sometimes when we live outside of the country, the media, the international media, always miss the point of how much support those people have in their countries. Putin could only go to war because the majority of Russians are with him, right? So this is something that people should have taken into consideration. They are nostalgic of something. They support Putin how Americans are supporting Donald Trump now. And I think the parallel is just being religious extremism and political extremism have so many things together, because the border is so blurry, because they really navigate between the two. Here, the alt-right, the racist white people, they always use Christianity in some of the part. In France, it's something known when they say La France judéo-chrétienne, they talk about that. When also they talk about in Russia, this is like our culture, they show the president in a mass, like praying. So this is something that people used always. So I think the parallel is that, how do they, Usman in this movie gets back to that. He's saying, we got to back to who we are. We got to back to our tradition. We're going to make our city how big it was. The city was amazing at some point. We're going to get back to that. Yeah.
So yeah, the question for Carmen is also from Pelume Folajimi, and then there's a question for both of you. But the one for you, Carmen, says if you have anything to say about the cultural significance of Boko Haram, what statements do the sect make about the culture of violence which one encounters in northern Nigeria? So we want to take that, and then there's a question from Adeleke Adieko that goes to both of you, but let's take this first.
Yes, thanks. I think that's a really good question. The Boko, in the videos that Shakal began to release, so he's very savvily using, at the time when he was alive, was using media to communicate not only with people in northern Nigeria, but around the world. He addresses himself to Obama and so on. But he framed his kind of insurgency as revenge against the Nigerian government for the killing of Muhammad Yusuf and all of the other Boko Haram members in 2009. So it's kind of a righteous fury that he frames it as. And picking up on, in Jos, there were some Christians who attacked some Muslims on a religious holiday, and there were actually videos of them cannibalizing people. And so using those kind of videos of violence as a way to respond to it, Boko Haram is able to frame themselves. There's a video that they put out when they invaded the prison. Hold on, I'm looking for the name. They should of Giwa Barracks in 2014, after the attack on Giwa Barracks, they released a video that shows themselves as kind of these conquering, people are running towards them as if seeking refuge. And so they frame themselves as kind of saving the people of Nigeria. And then there are cases where, there's so much violence in the army against the people living in villages in the north that they feel kind of caught between Boko Haram and between the soldiers. And so sometimes people put up with Boko Haram because at least they say things are orderly, they're not being attacked by soldiers. So I think Boko Haram is very much a response to violence and incompetence in the government as well.
Okay, well, thank you. So let's take this question, which is actually very short but very interesting question from Adeleke Adeko, simply asking whether there are non-religious responses, artistic responses to Boko Haram. So that may go forward towards you more, Carmen, but it's a question that after I've heard you out, I would actually like to maybe piggyback on and have both of you sort of take turns to answer. I have a slightly extended piggybacking ideas about it, but please.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I would think even Milkmaid and Voiceless, while they have religion in them, they're the video I showed at the very end is a very religious response, right? It's a Christian singer who's drawing on a lot of Muslim imagery and kind of trying to build community with Muslims. But they're Voiceless, the Milkmaid, I think they seek out an audience. It's not just a Nigerian one. And so, especially in Voiceless, I'm thinking it's never made clear whether the abducted girl and the abducted boy in that film are Christian or Muslim. There's a really great TV series in Love and Ashes that's made in English, but there are religious elements, but I don't know that religion is the point of the show.
Okay, actually that's along the lines which I'm thinking from listening to that video that you played, the music video that is. It's Christian, in fact it's using the Christian, Northern Christian or Hausa Christian word for God, which is not Allah, but Ubangiji. And essentially applying to the Holy, appealing to Holy Spirit, Christ, and all of that. So there's that. But it's also interesting, and this I think this is where I want to piggyback and have Mamadou also respond to, is the fact that he also making this appeal on behalf of Nigeria. So it may be a religious dialogue between Christianity and Islam, but in between there's also something that sort of centers the Nigerian nation. And so that then makes me wonder, and I'm thinking to ask both of you now, where do you think, both in this video and also in the film, Baamum Nafi Alaj, where do you think this idea of the, well, let's say the nation state or nationalism as opposed to religious or some kind of cultural nationalism as such, but the nation, the embodiment of law, the one who sends the mayor to distribute the grains, and the one that the governor of Kano State will appeal to to want to run for election. So the modern nation as such. So where do you think, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand where that element, that form stands in relation to fundamentalism. And so does that make sense? Because I think that there's a sense in which it's there and it's been displaced, but it's also being used, I think, in a very opportunistic, or maybe, if you want, instrumental manner. So I just wish you could respond to that.
I have a lot to say about that. Is that to Mamadou as well?
It's both to both of you, and that's why I make reference to the film.
Okay, well, I'll quickly go ahead. That gets exactly to something I've been writing about elsewhere, where I've been comparing the responses of these artists who were arrested during the censorship crisis and the way that they respond to that sort of oppression and the way that these Christian musicians are responding. And both of them appeal to kind of two citizenships in a way. They're both referring to Judgment Day and the end times and kind of to the justice of God. So they're claiming a religious identity, but they're also appealing to their rights as citizens in the state of Nigeria. And if I had continued that song, there's even an appeal to kind of world citizenship, and they show lots of world leaders who are upset about, who are speaking out against Chibok. So And then the filmmakers also, against kind of the oppression of the state, they're claiming on their rights as Nigerians to be selling these films all throughout the country. So both of them are claiming a Nigerian citizenship as well as kind of religious citizenship.
Okay. Amadou, do you have anything to offer?
Yeah.
There? Okay.
I think it's a very, very interesting question to talk about our nations and governments, because the reality is our actions also individually and as communities do matter, or our inactions actually. And I think sometimes we ask a lot to our nations. For instance, in the Baamum Nafi, the river you see there where Cherno is sitting is the actual border between Senegal and Mauritania. Or border I could cross and be repatriated if they don't want me to get in. But we still speak the same language, we wear the same clothes. So it's very interesting, this idea of nation. I cannot be a Senegalese nationalist knowing that my cousin is from Mauritania and my other cousin is from Guinea. It just doesn't click that much. I'm very proud, of course, but it's not just doesn't make a Senegalese solution wouldn't work, because this tiny river cannot be a solution here and a problem on the other side. We got to all come together. And our nations are very young, divided in some ways, and don't have that much power. Like the bigger power have so much play in our places. So I think the real thing for us is we do something individually in our communities. And to come back about the non-religious ideas, I think there is one of the solutions is already in the religion. Like there is this scene when Munzir talked to the Cherno. Those terrorists don't fight because of the 5 pillars of Islam. Every single Muslim in the world agrees on those 5 pillars. These are the 5 things: you pray, you fast, you go to Mecca when you can, you do the Shahada, and you recognize that Allah is your God and Muhammad your prophet. They don't fight about that. They fight about comments. They fight about smaller things. It's never about that. So the solution is there. Let's go back to the core of what made our religions. If you think we believe in this, that is what we believe. Everything else is commentary that we added later. And in the film, the solution also came from something that is not Islamic, that is not Christian. It's a practice that Fulani people used to do before both of those religions. It was where 2 families were interested in the same other family, because marriage is family. Once again, the marriage process is the heart of this film. So when families would be discussing, they would have a pawn or a spy in the other family to say, let's see, their discussions are going forward. But then if the families agree, they put these 2 together, the man and the woman, so they have sex in reality, and then the marriage has to be announced, because there is no other way to do it. That solution came from the pre-Islamic and pre-Christian practice. So for me, the solutions, some of them might be found there, going to the core of what makes us who we are, what makes a Nigerian a Nigerian, what makes a Senegalese a Senegalese, and what makes us the belief we have. And this Christian is, in the clip you showed, Carmen, is singing Isa, who is the name of Jesus, also in Quran. So there we have, let's focus on what we have in common, not the differences.
Interesting, thank you. So there's another question. So actually there's a comment or a question from Adeko again, essentially asking maybe to clarify my question, whether it's a question of imagining these sects, like Boko Haram, for instance, fighting each other on the basis of nation. So, and I think your responses are kind of implicit in that. So, but there's a second question from Mbar Kamara. I guess I think anyway. I know who that is. I suppose. The question is: in making the film Mamadou and in your research and scholarship, Carmen, how much have you thought about potential steps to prevent or stem the rise of extremism? So this is like asking you to take your food off the table, more or less. So if there's no Boko Haram, what will you eat? Anyway, so I'm just kidding. But the question is whether you've actually thought in a more pragmatic way of potential ways to prevent the rise of extremisms.
Well,
So
I can go on that because I want to respond to Mamadou, which is
okay.
within the religions themselves, right? There is the possibility of that. And in the video that I just showed, he refers to Allah and Ubangiji, to Isa and Yesu. And so this musician, in all of his music, he switches back and forth between these terminologies. There's another video on another album that I found this summer, where he's using an Arabic verse for protection that's prayed by Muslim, and he's singing that and then combining it with Christian voices. And so I think like embedded within that video and within some of the responses made by the Kannywood filmmakers to censorship, where they're seeking out community with the Nigerian nation, with in Ian Tama's film about his imprisonment, he shows Igbo marketers as being very much in support of him. They're all celebrating at the end when he gets out of prison and is, and so both sets of artists seem to look towards more of a cosmopolitan understanding of what being a Nigerian is, or what even being a Christian or Muslim is. Like in Mamadou's film, where you have the imam standing with the pastor, and they both share more than they with each other than they do with Usman. I think that's something that's pre-existing. It's already there. So somehow it has to be uncut. The politicization of religion for power should be confronted.
Do you have a response, Mamadou, or?
Yeah, I think for this last question from Mbak Kamara, I don't have the solutions, but I think one of the steps at the question is worded is that having an open discussion, because I think as long as we leave this as a taboo, then we are in trouble. Because the more we talk about, the more we realize. I have friends of mine I went to college with, young great ladies who chose to veil themselves because this is their choice. They wanted to do it. I know other people, Muslims, and who decide, yeah, I'm a Muslim, but I'm going to drink alcohol and I'm going to smoke tobacco. So this is the way, or how do we live our individual and private life within our religions, within our communities? How do these communities are evolving? How do, like Christianity, which is older than Islam chronologically and has Protestantism inside it. So how do we get to that? How do we talk about it? How do we open ourselves to the other people? How do we, so this is the answer. I think the more Basa is in the films, the guy who doesn't know. Sometimes those guys who don't know are easy targets. You feed them in, you take them. Usman is a character in the movie, but Usman today is also internet. Usman is YouTube. Usman is WhatsApp. I'm part of WhatsApp group messages. Sometimes I got a message. I'm like, I'm scared. I'm like, oh my God. So if you listen to this and you have no filter and you had no previous or prior connection to this material, you fucked in some way. Sorry for the word. So you're gonna just be like lost completely. So it was very interesting in that to see those people. So how do we talk to people like Basa? How do we get them understand that there's a plurality of religions, plurality of people? It's a whole spectrum. The way one can live is the way that other person can live it differently. So let's keep talking about, let's keep having an open discussion. Not only bombing and killing, it cannot be as, and even laws, you know, saying, okay, now there is a law, you cannot dress like this. And there is a law, you cannot act like this. It's wrong in some ways. Let's have a debate and let people behave the way they want to, as long as they know what that means for them and for the other people. Their freedom to the freedom. I think Zadie Smith, I'm going to paraphrase her, said that democracy is something we have to fight, keep fighting for. It's never something that we have that is there. I mean, January 6th was a good reminder in the US, right? Yeah. So could we just take those people who did the January 6th and say, this is how Americans are? No. So we shouldn't take the tiny fraction of extremists and say, this is how Muslims are.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, interesting. So I have something of an aesthetic question for you, Mamadou. So there's this very interesting film, very beautiful, really quite thoughtful. I find the character of Cheno very compelling, very brooding, extremely, brooding and considerate to the point of being powerless or weak, if you were to think of it like that. But really, you can see that he's a very thoughtful and powerful person. But my artistic question has to do with, there's this moment early in the film where Usman shaves somebody's head and says, your name is, was it Ibrahima or something like that? But so it sort of reminds me of that moment in Chedo by Usman Semben, and where, you know, the new imam began to convert people. So I'm wondering whether, and then there are also towards the end, where the tire catches fire, it's also very reminiscent of the end of Mulade, for instance. So I'm just wondering, these are your your fathers in African cinema, so to speak. So what's your, from an artist's point of view, how do you place this work, especially in relation to those who have made the film, not so much about religious fundamentalism, but also about this ongoing transformation of African society across time? And how do you place your own work in relation to Usman Sembe on the one hand, or maybe Sisako, or even, let's say, Suleiman Sise, you know, in a sense, because I also see echoes from some of his work there.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. But first, just to come back to Cherno.
Okay.
I don't see Cherno as a person of inaction. Cherno is a person like me. I know myself and I know many of my friends.
Okay.
We talk a lot about this, right? But what we're doing in reality, maybe the biggest thing we did is posting something on Facebook or sending a screenshot of something happening. What did we do when the girls were abducted in Nigeria? How many of us, probably some Americans are watching this, maybe they didn't go to vote the day of elections when Donald Trump got elected. Maybe they didn't have the time. Maybe the work schedule didn't allow that. So what I'm saying that is the majority of people who think they are progressist don't take action. This is Cherno. And Cherno is weak because also of his health. The film starts with him showing how he's back to us. I'm vulnerable, but I trust you. That's how we are. We are vulnerable. We trust a system that we know that needs us, but we don't get into it. So to the inspirational part, all of those filmmakers inspire me. I could only be a filmmaker today because of all those fathers you said, because they made movies. I could only be making movies because when I was a kid, I went to my neighbor's house and I was watching a TV. I started showing people speaking languages that I could speak. I started seeing people who looked like me. And I think the most amazing part of film for me is watching a movie, the switch off the TV, and you walk on a street that looks like the street that was in the movie. That's when I realized, oh, I too could make a movie one day. So the inspiration of shaving is probably, as again, a digestive inspiration. But for me, when I'm writing the script, Usman needed a ritual. Usman needed something symbolic to get those people in. Usman's idea is, even though those people are already Muslims, he thinks of them as not being pure. So the purity he's bringing is to kind of rinse them. And the rinsing part, shaving, is part of it. Even your hair is not pure for these people. Whatever you are, you have to be reborn again. So this shaving is a rebirth of that. So probably there is some Chedo in that. And the Suleiman Sisi and all of those people, I'm happy that you see that once again, the scholars could still make you think or make you remember that the inspiration was from there. But when I'm writing that scene, I'm not necessarily thinking of a specific one. But of course, it's a mix of all those movies I've seen that trained me. And I cannot thank those fathers enough, because it's because of them that these movies could be done in the rhythm they are and shared with the world.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So we waiting for questions, but let me, to keep this going, so let me ask this question about the marriage practice in the film. When I actually saw that, so I mean, I found your explanation about it being some kind of practice among Fulani people to be quite interesting. But I was actually thinking about it more in terms of also pre-Christian, especially in Senegal, and to some extent because I was thinking of it in terms of the relationship between matrilinealism and political succession. Because, I mean, the idea is that marriage within the family sort of keeps family together, but it's also the idea that you marry your cousin because you are sure that the child comes from the mother. You can't be sure that the child comes from the father. You see what I'm saying? So I guess I'm just interested in how much of this was a Fulani practice or something that actually predated Fulani in West Africa. I don't know how much of that you're able to go into, but I mean, there's some very strong references to this in works by Senegalese historians like Boubacar Bari and a few other people. So I'm just wondering, can you say more about that? I mean, is it more an appeal to religion, or is it more of a cultural kind of practice? Because I'm trying hard to imagine Fulani culture without Islam, if you know what I'm saying. So if you want to clarify that part for me, and then there's a question then. So
okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I think like Carmen has mentioned in her presentation,
okay,
the place of women in this film. And in my culture, in my community, in my family, women are powerful. And this power is so discreet that you don't even see it. I know that whatever my mothers or whoever we tell them when we want something, they are the ones who are making things happen. And today in many countries, you go early in the morning, the people taking the public transportation to go to the market, to go to sell or to buy are mostly women. So that's very important. It's not even taking a side. It's just saying how the reality is. Aisha, who played Nafi, this is the way she is. She is really, at the time of we were shooting the film, he just finished high school. She was getting ready to go to the university. So the things she's talking about are things she really knows. Rakia is the one who said, Cherno, we only call it Cherno now because we don't know your name. That's very powerful. That made him take another action. So I cannot talk to the whole Fulani community because it's probably 40 to 60 million people that I don't know much, but I can talk about mine. The reason of that Fulani community being is in Islam first is just a geographical reason, because they are in the northern part of Senegal. The river you see is Mauritania and the Sahara Desert. And then we know that Islam came from the trans-Saharan routes. Those merchants coming to sell and to buy at that time, in the past, were the one who brought in Islam at that time. And many kings started embracing that religion, and then started also having the people follow that religion. So I think it's true. And I think also it comes to the history of Africa that my business partner and I are still talking on another project, is that Africa is this continent that doesn't exist before colonialism. It's this continent that doesn't exist before Islam. Because whenever we talk about history of Africa, it's mostly, okay, it's when they collided with Europe or when they collided with the Middle East. But we had civilizations before. We had democratically elected people. We had so many things. So it's very interesting when we talk about Islam now and the Fulani herders, because they were the one also, when they got the Islam, they started also moving, because it's a community you find from the west to the east of Africa. So of course, Islam plays a big role of that. But I think Fulani people also, most of them are the ones I know, have kept a lot of knowledge and a lot of practices. The cow is still very important to us. This is pre-Islamic. The interfamilial marriage is not only about knowing who is the mother, it's also keeping the wealth within the family. When you marry your cousin, sometimes that cousin was actually given to your mom since she was a kid, or you were given to her dad since you were a kid. So you'd have the same upbringing, and probably you will have less fights because you want the same. You are going in the same space. You have the same norms, and you believe in the same system in that way. So yes, I think Islam is a big part of the Fulani today, but we still have Fulani people who are animists in many parts of the world. So I think that's historically and geographically a truth, and many of us live it. As one commenter said, it has to be, faith has to be very personal and very private. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So there's a question from Adrien Pouy. This is, I guess, directed to you, Mamadou, again. Will you share the process of making your films? Did you work with professional actors, or did you have to train acquaintances and make films with them? Did you have to improvise?
Yeah, so the process was very interesting. So I wrote this script over 2 years. And the first thing I realized once we got back to my hometown is the dialogues were problematic, because we're talking to a big community where many of us, as you know, Africa, rarely we speak the colonial language at home. We don't speak French or English at home. So many of these young actors or older actors didn't speak or read French at all, or English anyway. So I had to get rid of many part of my dialogue. So Alassane Sy, who is Cherno, is a professional actor. He played in Andrew Dosomnu's Restless City. He played in Mediterranea. He is really a known actor. Ousmane is an actor at the Théâtre National Daniel Sorano in Senegal, who is the brother, and who is also from my home city. But everyone else, I have to go there with the script. So one of the realization was to keep the script open, right? Because there was no way I don't have that knowledge. Some people have the genius of doing it. Take someone who never acted before and make them be another person. So I had to go the other way around, get the script to the people. The way Nafi is, that's the way she's going to be in the movie. And that's the way she really is. Tokara, that young man who's almost soft, but at the same time so loving and caring. This is the way he is in real life. So we had to do workshops, like first workshop without camera, where I would just talk to them, give them situations. And I was very careful to not give them anything that was part of the script. Because generally for non-actors, when they play a script, a scene, and you say, this is great, they're going to just keep doing the same. Because this is great already. So the idea was not play with the script. And then slowly we brought on the director of photography with the camera. And then it's so interesting to see these people who never played, because when Nafi is, I don't know, crying or by herself thinking of something, she's probably surrounded by 20 people. These two are holding lights just around her ear. The other ones have a boom mic. The other one is a camera. So it was a very interesting process to see them do it. And I cannot thank them enough, because they really, really worked hard to make it happen. So having an open script, doing a lot of workshop, a lot of rehearsals, and then shooting not many takes, 1-2 takes. When something is not working, just changes on the spot. And that was also something that was very helpful for us.
Okay. Thank you. So there's something of a follow-up question to that, which, because I mean, it's a question about how what's done in Senegal, whether it has that opportunity to be shown. You've said this before, but the nature of YouTube is also that people come in and go, so people may not. So it would actually be nice for you to respond to that. Share with us what you shared previously about how outside of the country is done very well. 18 festivals, but in Dakar or in Senegal in general, what's the reception been like?
Yeah, so in Senegal, as I mentioned it before, the national premiere means the first time you show the film in Senegal. We went back to Matam, where the movie was shot. So we had this huge screen and a projector. We showed it in an open air space for 2 nights in a row, where people would come, the actors, their parents, their family, their friends, everyone was there. The authorities, everyone was there to watch the movie. And then we toured Senegal. We went to Saint Louis of Senegal, we went to Thiès, we went to Dakar University, and the movie had a theatrical release in Senegal. So it was shown in theaters in Senegal. And also it was in a festival in Senegal that's called Filmmakers Afrique. So Senegalese people had the opportunity to see it. And later we had a deal with Canal Plus to show it in all around the Francophone world. And it's a very interesting deal to mention, because sometimes Canal Plus want to dub the movies in French. And I remember my business partner and I just fighting so hard to tell them, no, Nafi, the way she talks is very important. And it was they're very nice that they accepted that fact and they went with it, and they allowed us the movie to be shown in Canal Plus with the Fulani speaking, with the Polar speaking world, and being subtitled in French. So the movie has been shown in Senegal, and now that COVID is also getting down, we can also show it again, because we're making the movies first for our people. That's why they need it. That's why they speak the way they speak.
Okay, thank you. So a question for you, Carmen, because we also want to hear from you in terms of, by the way, the question is from an audience member called Jilami Koli. So just for the records. So back to the question for you, Carmen, can you say something about how your book with Brandon Kendhammer is done? It's also interesting always, I guess, to write a book about Boko Haram because the whole idea of Boko Haram is that, don't read book, but you've had to write a book to say that, sort of give a very interesting social accessible. By accessible, I mean written for the popular audience, because I guess that's the basis of the series under which the book was published. So can you say something about how you came to write the book and how it's done so far from the point of view of the audience that you imagined for it?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I had become really interested in these representations of Boko Haram, these responses to it. I described hearing this car with a loudspeaker going around the neighborhood with these songs. So I met up with Brandon, who had been my Hausa classmate at Wisconsin at an African Studies Association conference. And I was talking to him about it and some of the things that I was thinking about writing about. And he actually had just gotten a contract to write the book. He's like, could you please write it with me? Because I think this material would add a lot to the book. So that's kind of how we came to write it together. And he focused more on the history, political science stuff. I focused more on the cultural responses. So the audience we're imagining, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of kind of heavy academic. There are a lot of footnotes in the endnotes in the end. I created the index, but it's a small little book. It's meant probably more for people who don't know a lot about Boko Haram. So I don't know actually how useful it is in Nigeria, although I think that it is interesting to think about some of these responses that people don't know about. So like the video that I just showed, people are often surprised when they see that, even in Nigeria. So that's how the book came to be. We wrote kind of discrete chapters and then kind of commented and we wrote sections of each other's chapters, moved things from one chapter into another chapter. And that's kind of how we went about. I'm very grateful for Brandon. He's very patient with me. When I was moving country at the time, I was at Kwara State University in Nigeria when we started. Then I moved to my current institution, and there was a lot of movement and time that was spent on it.
Thank you. So Mamadou, sorry again, your questioner is back, Gulame Koli, asking, following your response, that is, if you will consider partnerships with some of the local TVs, such I believe these are in Senegal, TFMs or TOOS TV that have been striving. Is this something? Okay?
I think probably this is our connection, francophone and anglophone. This is probably Guillaume Colli. He's talking about TFM and Desert TV. Yeah, totally. I mean, I know all those TVs, and I am very open to. My business partner, we are very open to show those movies. And something we don't know much is the business plan of those TVs. They have to make a living also. And to be honest, films like this haven't particularly been very interesting for partners, because the idea of a TV show would be, TV shows are really thriving in Senegal, like a lot, like in Nigeria, as Carmen mentioned. And the people, let's say, I don't know, a company who makes cars, they want you to split the TV show in half and show the cars at the end. So for movies, they haven't been very interested in that because the pool is not that strong yet. And it's a big debate. Do filmmakers have to do that part too? Do they have to write and direct and produce and make the movies and then fight for it to be seen all the time? Or should be another system, or we have an industry where people have the distribution, because distribution is the hardest part. We drove our own van through the Senegal, collaborated with a song that's called Centre Yenenga, created by the filmmaker Alan Gomez. Do we have to do it every time we make a movie? That's tough to do, right? And so if those TVs, I'm sure we're going to go back to them again, because to some we went and talked to them, and it's still that part of the thing. Could you just give us your movie for free? Of course we could, but still these movies have been made because this movie, once again, is an auto production. We didn't have a co-production. We didn't have money from anywhere. It was all from Senegal, Senegalese people like Mohamed Julian, like people who really helped us to make this movie, and our savings, and the technicians who agreed to work for way less. Because the people who worked on this movie are those who worked on Atlantics of Mati Job, are those who worked on Félicité by Alain Gomez. So these people came and helped us. And we cannot keep asking for favors. And for that to happen, we need to even have a private TV to say, hey, we could put this small check on the table. You can go and pay your writing fees next time, or this can help for your next movie. So then it's always the visual circle of getting people from the outside giving you a little less because no one else is interested in your country. And the job you're doing, we keep doing it. We're gonna again show the movie in Senegal. We show it in Centre-Yenenga like a month or 2 months ago. We're gonna keep showing it. So we're gonna keep talking to these local TVs because they're really followed in Senegal, and would love people to watch more movies from us.
Interesting, thank you. So, well, you just mentioned Alain Gomez, who is the author of Félicité. So I have a question about that, since you're discussing what one might understand generally as industry issues. I'm just wondering, his film Félicité was also Senegal's entry to Oscars, I believe in 2018 or 2019. But so I guess that my question is, what's the deal in Senegal about this, especially in terms of how this, what from your experience of actually working on this film and having it go all the way to be nominated for Oscars for Senegal. How do you square that kind of publicity or that promotion that makes it actually visible with this other industry question you just mentioned? So how did you negotiate that between this idea of wanting to be everything or being forced to do everything about your film, but also having to go all the way to pushing it to the level where it goes all the way to the Oscars?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because my business partner, Mabana, we always debate about that. And also the debate is the Oscar run costs so much money that it's all about money. It's sad. The movies who have a biggest budget, marketing budget are those movies who are going to be seen, because the Oscar is organized in a very weird way where the members don't have to see a movie necessarily. So the voters for the International Committee, they have a set of movies to see, right? Let's say there are 100 movies from 100 different countries. So the voters would be said, you could watch 10 of them in order to vote for those movies. They would watch the movie they heard about. How do you make a movie from Nigeria or from Senegal or from Mali be heard from this voter who lives in, I don't know, countryside Iowa? You need a lot of money for that. And we don't have that money. We were lucky that we got Senegalese government that supported us, but still the questions remained. Should we use that money for an Oscar run that people don't care in our country? Senegalese people don't care about Oscars. They know Cannes, they know FESPACO, that's it, right? And there may be some other festivals. Then you do the Oscar run and say, should I have used this money to make another movie probably, and not do a run that people don't know about? So filmmakers are asked to be doing a lot. And this was the issue for a long time. And one of the issues we're trying to always debate and talk about is films being related to filmmakers. We have filmmakers in Africa. We had filmmakers in Africa who've been powerhouses. But when they died, everybody crumbled around them. Everything crumbled, everything stopped. Usman Sembène is a school today. Djibril Diop Mambéty, Idrissa went Traoré. But when they went, nothing is left. So how do we do that? Not only on filmmakers, but on many of us, many levels. How do we get our rich people? We have a lot of rich people in Africa. How do we get them to invest in movies, right? How do we get our people go watch movies? The theater we ran our film in Senegal was showing at that time, I think it was Bad Boy 3 or something. That room would be full. The room we would be showing our movie would be maybe a fourth or fifth full. How do we do that? Is it the filmmakers to gather and change what they're doing? Is it to, I don't know. So it's a lot of questions about that. So filmmakers are asked to be doing a lot. It's a privilege to know how much we learned through that. It's a good learning process, but also I think we need to gang up together, know each other more, collaborate more, because what we learned from this process, we could help another person get there in some ways, the Oscar runs and all of that. So I think it would be helpful if filmmakers get together, and it would be helpful also that the distribution side of it being done in Senegal. Alain Gomez is doing a lot by that. Maybe he's something in Enga, and there are other people who are really trying hard to get that part of the filmmaking. So our movies could be seen everywhere, because it's not only about the quality of the film, it's also about how much marketing budget you have. And that's a little sad, but that's the reality.
Thank you, guys. So we're coming towards the end, but I would still like to hear from you if you have final thoughts to share about your work or about this phenomenon. I mean, I know that you made a film before, Baamum Nafi, and it would actually be nice to talk about that as well. Of course, I'm really interested in hearing it from either of you or both of you, as a matter of fact, about your projects, both on this film or on this work that we're talking about now, but also some things that may actually be only tangentially related. If you have some final thoughts to share, people would like to know you, get to know you now, but also be able to keep track of your work going forward.
I would also love to hear about your next project.
I thought you were going first, so I was just getting ready to answer after you. But yeah. Okay, so yeah, there was another short film, a couple of other short films. There was one that's called Samedi Cinema that talks about also the issues of not having screens, not having theaters to watch our movies in Senegal. And that movie came from a childhood memory that I did already, and my siblings and some other friends did also, was being the kid who went to school. One of them, that time, was the letters that people would be using. And we're talking about pre-mobile phone era, right? So adults would call me and dictate from Fulani, and I would transcribe their letters in French and bring it to the post office. And then when they get the answer, I would read the answers to them. It was like TV shows before TV shows, because I got to know a lot. And I think I knew a lot about my community at that age. I didn't like it that much because it was learning too many secrets from adults and families. And the Fulani society, or my society, my community, from the outside as a kid, seems perfect. Everyone is happy, everyone is smiling. And then when I started writing those letters, I realized this is something that is broken, and a lot of it actually. So that was an interesting part. And now I'm trying to get off a project that is also, this one is mostly talks about mourning, like losing a loved one, but talks also a lot about mental health. Because during this COVID year, we've seen that so many people have struggled. And the more I talk to my friends and my family, I realize that in Fulani nor in Wolof, those two languages I speak in Senegal, we don't have a word for depression. So the question is like, how do we heal from something we don't have a name for? So this sparks another thing that I'm working on a script, and then the more I read, the more I'm lost. So I love scholars a lot, but they make me lost every time, because I read something, I think this is the truth, and the next book is going against the first one, saying, no, what he said was. So I'm more lost than ever. I think I'm going to stop reading at some point and writing more. So that's the project we are trying to take off this time, and hopefully get more support to make it the best we could to then shooting again in Senegal. And we're also trying to support other filmmakers, not only in Senegal, but from all Africa in the diaspora, who have projects. We are willing to take more projects, because the idea is not just a filmmaker, but the idea is to have a whole generation working together to get these films out and to get them be shared and so on.
I'm sorry, I have people talking in the background if you hear anything. But I'm currently trying to work on my book which is tentatively titled "God Has Exposed You" as the first part, which is a quote from Ian Tama's docudrama that I briefly showed the poster of previously, which is, I think both these Muslim and Christian filmmakers that I talked about are talking about exposure in several different ways. So kind of exposing the secrets. It was interesting hearing about all the secrets you're learning from these letters, where Fulani society seems perfect on the outside, but then you see all the problems inside. And I think that's something that the films are often doing in Kannywood, and that's part of the tension that they face with the critics, that they're kind of airing dirty laundry in some ways, or they're exposing children to corrupting influences by describing the corrupt things happening in society. So there's that kind of exposure going on, but it's seen as a kind of necessity for cleansing, for kind of bringing these things out and cleansing them. And also this idea of exposure as a kind of cosmopolitan coming together. You asked earlier about kind of the nation and thinking about people as Nigerians or as citizens of the world. And so that seems to be another thing that the filmmakers in Kannywood are often doing, especially when they were under the censorship regime, thinking about how are we connected to larger things? How can we connect ourselves to Nollywood, to larger film industries? How can we go to film festivals, right? These are things filmmakers are asking me for advice on, so I might ask Mamadou's advice on how people can get to film festivals. I think a lot of it is connections and money and so on. So that's what I'm thinking about in my book, and I'm trying to get it together. But also, I'm also very interested in kind of this small Christian Hausa media production in Jos, in the Middle Belt region of the country, and thinking about how Jos in Nigeria is this very cosmopolitan place where people from all over have come together, and what comes out of that, what kind of artistic stuff. So you see people from Jos going into Nollywood, into Kannywood, Kenneth Yang, who went to NFI from Jos, working in both film industries. And so it seems to be a place where a lot of people are mixing. And I'm very invested in this idea of, well, I mean, even before extremism, but the question that was asked earlier about what are the solutions to this? And I think how Jos was before 2001, when the first kind of political religious crises happened, there's a real richness there to the culture of Jos. And so that's kind of the next thing that I want to look at, what's going on specifically in Jos as far as cultural production and thinking about being a Nigerian.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks to both of you. This has been quite a ride, and it was a real pleasure to have you and listen to you and have you speak so passionately and generously about your work. So thank you so much. It was good to have you, and also want to thank our audience for their attention and their attendance. It's always quite a thrill to see people responding, engaging in real time with your questions and your comments. So thank you, and we'll have another edition this time next month, late April, and we'll hope to see you then. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.